There's tired, and then there's exhausted. It's that feeling in your spirit, like your soul is running as fast as it can to catch the present moment. But it just can't quite get there. It's the commitment to a million things that are supposed to be filling you up, but they're only burning you out. All this more and more gives you less and less. You go and you're constantly connected. But the screens and the scurry turn up empty. This can't be the way. Life can't just be about hurry.
Well, good morning. It's great to be together this morning. As Gretchen reminded us this afternoon, at 4 o'clock is our Fall Fest. And we're asking two things of you. One, to come, because we love being together. This is a church-wide event, and it's great when we get to be together as a church in an environment like the Fall Fest, where we get to mingle with one another, and we get to catch up, and we get to grab a pumpkin, maybe eat some food and get some coffee from the coffee truck. And then two is this is a big event for our community. There are people that invite friends to come to this. There are some people that talk about their neighborhood Facebook page that talks about our Fall Fest. So a lot of people from the community come. And so the second thing we're asking of you is to find someone you don't know and introduce yourself to them. Because if someone's coming to our Fall Fest today, we believe that they're coming for one thing, and that is to find a connection. Because there's a lot of different festivals that take place around Columbus. They're coming here because they're looking for a connection. So let's help them make that connection and walk up to somebody you don't know and introduce yourself to them. We're looking forward to our afternoon together, 4 o'clock in the church backyard. This morning, we get to continue something that we started last week. Last week, we started a series titled Ruthless, Elimination of Hurry. I love that title. We are going to ruthlessly eliminate the pace of a hurried life. Because we know this, a hurried life produces a hurried soul. And a hurried soul is a distracted soul. And a distracted soul is the number one way that the enemy will come in and attack us, to get us distracted from who God is and our relationship with Him. So we need to ruthlessly eliminate the pace of a hurried life. We need to be intentional. We need to be cutthroat. We need to take this thing seriously, and we need to make some tough decisions in our lives that will slow down the pace in which we are living to protect the thing that matters most, and that is our soul. Hurry, by definition, is a product of time. We hurry because we try to get as many things that we can possibly get done into a small block of time. We move from one thing to another as fast as we can. Hurry is controlled by time because we feel like we don't have enough of it. Vince Lombardi, the famous football coach, once said, "Hey, we didn't lose the game, we just ran out of time." Sometimes we think we just had more time, than everything in our life, all the problems that we have would be solved. Maybe we can get more things done, or maybe we can say, all right, I got all these things going on. I just don't have time to slow down. I just don't have time to rest. So if I had more time in my life, then I would be able to rest. Then I'd be able to slow down. Then I'd be able to do some things of leisure. Well, guess what? The remedy to a hurried life isn't more time. It's being intentional with the time that we have. So a question we got to ask ourselves is this: how well do we spend our time? Well, let's play a little game here to help us get to know each other in the room, all right? Everybody loves games on Sunday morning. We're going to play one because I believe this. There are two types of people in this room right now. One type of person, they're always on time. They're early is on time for them. And then the other person that says, well, yeah, that's if it says this, they don't really mean be there by that time, okay? So raise your hand if you're a punctual person, you're always on time. That's too many hands for the 11 o'clock service, all right? I'll tell you that. You're here in the third service for a reason. You're here in the third service for a reason. I'll take it. Everybody else says they're good. They're not good with time. Everybody else is like, hey, if it starts at 6, that means we leave by 6 o'clock. We got some in there. If that's you, maybe you feel like this woman here on her way to work. Hey, listen, sometimes you got to do what you got to do, right? Maybe you felt that way on the way into church this morning, just rushing to get here. Thankful that we added the 11 minutes to the 11 o'clock service, that I gave a little bit more time to get here. Here's the thing, more time is not the answer. We need to slow down. Last week, as Jay talked about, we need to slow down so that our soul can catch up with our body. That's what we need. To start this series off, we quoted Dallas Willard, and Dallas Willard said this. He said, hurry is the great enemy of our spiritual day. It's a great enemy of our spiritual day because it distracts us. It produces a distracted soul. And this morning, we will look at the beginning of a series of practices, of spiritual practices that we can do that will help our bodies slow down so that our souls can catch up. Turn with me to Mark chapter 1. In Mark chapter 1, we're going to see that Jesus has a very busy day. Actually, Jesus does a lot in this day. And we're going to see that Jesus does more in this one day than you and I could ever do in a day. But it does lead us to this question of how do we cope with busyness? What do we do to typically unwind after a busy day or a busy season? What do you like to typically do? And you've had a long day. At the end of the day, you're like, okay, I just need to be on the couch. I just need my feet propped up. I need to binge watch some Netflix. I need to eat some popcorn or whatever it is. Think about how you unwind after a busy day, how you refuel. We're going to see how Jesus does this after an extremely busy day. Let's start there, Mark chapter 1, starting in verse 21. They went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, Jesus went into the synagogue and began to teach. The people were amazed at his teaching because he taught them as one who had authority, not as the teachers of the law. Just then, a man in their synagogue who was possessed by an impure spirit cried out, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." Now, Jesus is teaching in their synagogue, and teaching is tiring. Just ask a school teacher. I know we're just a couple months into the school year, but I also know this for some of our school teachers, you're tired. You know, last week we had a Connect class, and I was teaching the Connect class, and our Connect class is for people who are relatively new to our church, and we get to talk about our church makeup. We get to talk about our church vision and some of the ways that we are involved in our community and how people can get connected here at the church. And this question came up about how our church interacts with the schools around us and what school districts, come to our church. And I was able to say proudly, hey, we got a lot of teachers in our church that are all over the city of Columbus. And leaders in our church that are all over the city of Columbus. But more specifically to our church, placed right in between Worthington School District and Olentangy School District, we have a lot of teachers and school leaders that are in our church that are involved in our local schools. And I just want to say this, we're thankful for you. We're thankful for the way that you engage our community. We're thankful for the way that you encourage students in your class. We're thankful for the way that you shine light each and every week. And we know that you go through a lot, and we know that it can be tiring. And Jesus knows that as well. Jesus knows you're tired. Jesus is teaching. And while he's teaching, he even has a heckler in the crowd. This guy starts shouting out at Jesus while he's teaching and screaming. And this is how Jesus responds in verse 25. Be quiet. Don't you want to have the courage to tell people that more? I would love to tell somebody, hey, just be quiet. I don't want to hear that right now. I'd like to have the courage that Jesus has. Jesus says, be quiet. Come out of him. The impure spirit shook the man violently, and came out of him with a shriek. The people were all so amazed that they asked each other, "What is this? A new teaching and with authority? He even gives orders to impure spirits and they obey him." News about him spread quickly over the whole region of Galilee. Remember that now. Spread quickly over the whole region of Galilee. Now, the morning church service is over. Jesus has been teaching. Jesus has done two monumental things. He was teaching, and then he just performed a healing, a miracle. He cast out the demon from this man. Now, to you and I, that's a pretty full day, isn't it? That's a productive day, but Jesus isn't done. Verse 29, as soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the house of Simon and Andrew. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they immediately told Jesus about her. So he went to her, took her hand, and helped her up. The fever left her, and she began to wait on them. After a long day of teaching, after performing a miracle, Jesus is led to Simon Peter's house where his mother-in-law is sick, and despite his orders, Jesus heals her. Somebody catch that? All right. Despite Peter's orders, Jesus heals her. This is his mother-in-law. Somebody finally got it? Jesus has done three monumental things here in this one day. Jesus has taught. Jesus has cast out a demon. Now Jesus has healed Peter's mother-in-law. Three monumental things in a day. Now Jesus is spiritually, physically, emotionally exhausted. That's a lot of stuff in one day. That's a lot that's going on in one day. And guess what? He isn't done. Verse 32, that evening after sunset, the people brought to Jesus all the sick and demon-possessed. All of the sick and demon-possessed. The whole town gathered at the door where this healing is taking place. Now the whole town is there. And Jesus healed many who had various diseases. He also drove out many demons, but he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. After a full day's work, after teaching, casting out demons, healing, the whole town hears about this. Have you heard about this thing that this man Jesus is doing? So they bring everybody to the house. Everybody in the whole town gathers jam-packed around this one house, and they start pushing people up to the door that are sick or ill or need some type of healing. And Jesus spends time with them all. Now, we can't miss the magnitude of what's taking place here on this day. There's a lot that's going on right now. People talking about maximizing your time and 10xing this, or production gurus or time management gurus. Nobody can replicate the day that Jesus just had. Nobody can do all the things that Jesus just did in this one day. Now Jesus is really exhausted. Have you ever felt exhausted? Have you ever felt emotionally exhausted? Have you ever felt physically exhausted? Have you ever felt spiritually exhausted? Jesus has done all of this in one day. And again, we ask the question, what do we do when we're tired? This is how Jesus responds, verse 35. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. It was up late the night before. So when evening came, the whole town gathered around the door. Who knows when or if Jesus went to sleep? And very early in the morning, he goes out to the solitary place where he prayed. When the tank was empty, Jesus prioritized spending time with his Father. When he was exhausted and he felt like there was nothing else left, Jesus prioritized spending time with the Father. What's Jesus teaching us here? See, Jesus knows the importance of relational connectivity with the Father. And above all else, above sleeping in, above saying, hey, I'm tired, I'm just going to lay out on the couch, I'm just going to watch this show, I just need some time by myself. Above all else, Jesus prioritized spending time with the Father. He knew that this was the only way to truly refuel and to find rest. You know, a couple decades ago, there was this phrase that we used in Christian circles that's called quiet time. We would often ask each other, hey, how's your quiet time going? Or how do you spend your quiet time? And our quiet time was time that we spent with God. It was our solitary place. We have somewhat drifted away from prioritizing this in our lives and have pursued a life of hurry and distraction. Now we struggle with being in the quiet. Now we struggle sitting alone or being alone. Stillness is uncomfortable to us. I mean, just think about this for ourselves, or even if you observe this with other people, but I'm sure it speaks to you, speaks to me. How many times we wait in line at the grocery store, or wait in line to get a cup of coffee, or even wait while we're pumping gas and have to scroll through something? Have to do something. We just can't be still. Let these numbers sink in for just one moment. The average smartphone user touches their phone over 2,600 times a day. That's the average smartphone user. A study just on millennials showed twice that amount. One study just on social media revealed that the average American is on social media 705 hours a year. That's a month of the year spent just scrolling through social media. Another study on screen watching, whether it's TV, I'm just going to watch this show or watch the news, or TV watching. That could be movies, YouTube videos. A study showed over 2,000 hours a year the average American spends watching some type of screen. That is months, plural, added up, that's wasted looking at a screen. You don't even want to know the number on video games. It's insane. And it's not just about PlayStation or Xbox. It's even the games that you have on your smartphone, the apps that you play. Here's the point. We foolishly spend time on things that don't matter. And we've lost the ability to sit in the quiet. You know, a churchy way to describe quiet time with God is by calling it silence and solitude. Silence and solitude is a spiritual discipline. It's a spiritual practice. And we have to be careful to define what solitude is, because solitude is not the same as isolation. Isolation is all about me. Isolation is shutting everything else off, including God, and withdrawing by ourselves. It's me-focused. Solitude is relational. It's engaging with the presence of God. Isolation says, hey, I'm tired, I need some me time, and you just turn everything else off and you push everything aside. Solitude says, hey, I'm tired, I need to engage with the presence of God. John Mark Comer, in his book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, writes this: solitude is how you open yourselves up to God. Isolation is painting a target on your back for the tempter. When we seek isolation, we put ourselves in our most vulnerable and weakest state because we're tired emotionally, physically, spiritually, and we seek to withdraw from everything else, and we're putting ourselves in a very vulnerable state for Satan to come in and attack us and tempt us in ways that we didn't even think we could be tempted by. Solitude is relational. It's engaging with the presence of God. Jesus pursued solitude as a part of his spiritual rhythms. We see it all throughout the Gospels. In the Gospel of Luke, there's 9 different times where it tells us that Jesus went off to a solitary place and prayed. Luke 5:16 reads, Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Luke 22:39 reads, Jesus went out as usual to the Mountain of Olives, and his disciples followed him. The Mount of Olives became a place of rhythm and routine for Jesus. And Jesus went out to the Mount of Olives to pray. And it said that his disciples followed him there. They followed in Jesus' practice and routine. What is our church's vision statement? Somebody say that for me. What's our church vision statement? Follow Jesus together. We are following Jesus together. As we follow Jesus, we also follow in the spiritual practices that Jesus practiced. That includes withdrawing to solitary places and spending time in the presence of God. Now, let me just suggest 4 practical things that can be helpful to enhance our time of solitude. One is this: we need to find a time and a place. A time and a place. There's something about the familiarity of saying, okay, this is where I engage in the presence of God. This is where I pursue God's presence each and every day. Think about this in your life and in your home or in your circle where you travel throughout the week, wherever it might be. What is a place? It's time and a place. You can say, when I'm here, this is an ordained time, an ordained place. When I'm here, I'm engaging with the presence of God. Pick a place. Second thing is pick a plan. Have a plan ready to go that, okay, when I'm in this space, I'm in this place, that this is what I'm doing to encounter God's presence. I would encourage reading your Bible, and this is just a personal preference, but in times of solitude like this, I would encourage reading a physical Bible, going through the pages. And there's all kinds of reading plans out there. You can find one, follow one. The third thing is bring a pen with you. Maybe you can write down some things that stick out to you in Scripture. Maybe you can write down some questions that you have throughout the week. Maybe you have questions for God. Maybe you're writing down a prayer. That's our 4th thing, prayer. Jesus withdrew to these places of solitude where he prayed. Pick a place, pick a plan, bring a pen, and say a prayer. 4 practical things that we could do to enhance our time of solitude. Now, I'm going to be transparent with you for a moment. Perhaps even, for me, vulnerable. I struggle with this. You know, over the last 5 years, there have been 3 times that I have taken a personality assessment with one-on-one coaching after the assessment, and all 3 times they said the exact same thing about me. See, I took the first test, had the first session, I didn't like it, so I went to the second one. Second thing said the same thing the first one did, I didn't like it, so I sought a third time. Took an assessment with a coach, and they all 3 said the same thing about me. And it was this: I struggle with the hurried life. Now, on the surface, you might think, Austin, that's not that bad. I struggle with it too. I mean, it's the pace of the suburban culture, and we're just on the go, go, go. It's when we begin to pull back the layers that it gets a little bit more revealing. To say, what's causing this? We began to pull back the layers in my life, and it's where it became ugly for me. See, the root of the problem is this: I struggle with trying to gain the approval of other people more than I do God. I often find my value in what other people think of me more than I do what God thinks of me. When I found this out, it was a hard, hard pill to swallow. And you know what I've learned throughout this? I've learned that seeking the approval of other people, it leads to a hurried life and a distracted soul, an unsettled soul. One coach had this one way to describe me. Slowing down likely does not feel right and makes you feel guilty, lazy, or counterproductive. You might also say that you just don't know how to slow down. You could be a driven, high-energy person who is not usually negatively coping through busyness. Yet, it is likely that you are covering things up with activity and depending on constant activity to fill your mind and keep your attention. You feel best when you're on the go and do not have time for reflection. It is possible that you avoid quiet and stillness to cover up unwanted thoughts and emotions. That one was a hard one. You may be avoiding feelings of inadequacy or anxiety when things are unfinished or undone. You may also be avoiding disappointing someone or failing by staying busy most of the time. You may push yourself to keep going in an attempt to meet expectations and keep people happy. Maybe that could be said of you too. Busyness keeps us from reflection. Busyness keeps us from sitting in the stillness and wrestling with our emotions and wrestling with what's going on the inside. Busyness keeps us focused on who we are to other people instead of who we are to God. In another coaching session I had from another personality assessment, the coach told me that I seek to achieve things in life because I feel unvalued by other people, and so I keep trying to seek their approval. At this point, I'm like, okay, I get it. Okay, can we move on from this? And he said, do you have a park nearby? I said, yeah, there's a great park. It's called High Banks Metro Park. It's just a few miles north of our church. He said, here's what I suggest. Go to this park, leave your phone in the car, and go sit somewhere in the park by yourself and just do it for 5 minutes. And so I went to High Banks. I left my phone in the car. It was in the early morning. I set a timer on my watch. I hiked out into the woods. I found a bench, and I hit start. And I was going to sit there for 5 minutes, and I vowed that I wouldn't look at my watch. Do you know that was the longest 5 minutes of my life? And I did that again over a period of days and weeks until eventually this practice has become a part of my rhythm and routine, where now I do that in my own home, and I give the first fruits of the day to God and spend time in His presence. And can I tell you this? It's the most soul-feeding spiritual practice that I participate in. It's in this moment that I can slow down and allow my soul to catch up with my body. It's in this moment that I get to engage in the presence of God and feel deeply connected to Him. And here are two things that I've learned from practicing solitude. One is this: God loves me for who I am, not what I do. There's nothing that I can do to prove myself to God. God already did that for me by sending His Son Jesus to die on the cross for my sins and for yours as well. That we stand before God already approved because of what Jesus has done. And when we enter into a relationship with Jesus, church, that is a freeing thing. And when we enter into a relationship with Jesus, you know what else is also freeing? Now there's nothing that I can do to separate myself from the love of God. The Apostle Paul reminds us of that. He says, there is no death, nor life, nor angels, nor demons, nor the present, nor the future, nor any powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation that will be able to separate us from the love of God. There's nothing I can do to earn God's approval. I stand approved because of what Jesus has done for me. God loves me for who I am, not what I do. And the second thing I've learned is this: God's plan for me is greater than other people's expectations of me. God's plan for me is greater than other people's expectations of me. And spending time in the presence of God brings clarity to the mission of God. And I want to be about the mission of God more than I want to be about meeting other people's expectations. I want to be about God's mission more than I want to be about appeasing other people's expectations of me. And when I care about meeting other people's expectations, guess what? I will always live a hurried life. In this passage, Jesus breaks off to the solitary place where he prayed. And guess what? They went looking for him. Verse 36 of Mark 1, Simon and his companions went to look for him. And when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." Hey, Jesus, guess what? All these people that were at the door of the house, they're back, and they have expectations of what you should be doing. They have expectations of who you are. They have expectations of what you should be doing, so we got to get you back. Jesus replied, "Let us go somewhere else." That's code for Jesus to say no. Jesus says no. Let's go somewhere else to the nearby village so I can preach there also. That's why I have come. So he traveled throughout Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and driving out demons. After spending time in solitude, in the presence of the Father, Jesus can say no to other people's expectations. Church, listen to me on this. Ruthlessly eliminating hurry means being able to say no to other people's expectations of who we should be and what we should be doing. And a dedicated time spent with God brings clarity to who we are in the eyes of God, and it brings clarity to the mission of God in which we're invited to join. So we've got to take this seriously. We've got to prioritize time, being in the presence of God. Author and theologian Henri Nouwen said, "This is life or death." He said, "Without solitude, it's virtually impossible to live a spiritual life." Will you grow in this with me? Will you join me in growing in this practice of silence and solitude and being in the presence of God each and every day as a spiritual rhythm?